Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt live in Studio West. David Bahnsen is the managing partner of the Bahnsen Group. He's also the author of the book Full Time, which is all about work and the joys of work. But we're not going to talk about full time this morning, David. We're going to first of all talk about wintertime. Have you been following this storm? Are you in the east or the west?
I'm here in New York. It hasn't come up here yet. It's nice and chilly, but no big storm yet. I guess that's more of a DC thing here than a Big Apple thing.
Well, I'll talk with Selena Zito after the break. They have 17 inches on the ground in Pittsburgh, and it's headed towards D.C., so we'll find out from someone else. David, the reason I want to talk to you this week is you're our go-to guy on financial matters, on markets, on trends. What do you expect for the markets in 2025?
Well, I think the markets are in a tension point, Hugh, around this fundamentally good part of the economy and fundamentally good expectations out of Trump 2.0, along with the other side, the tension coming from the valuations that are already pricing a lot of that in. And markets can get really bad when there's bad fundamentals and high valuations. Markets can be really good when there's good fundamentals and low valuation. It becomes trickier here when you have good fundamentals but already high valuations. And that's kind of the tug of war I think we're facing. I'm very encouraged by some of the stuff over the weekend. I prefer one big reconciliation bill because I do not want them putting off tax reform till the very end of the year and leaving markets sort of uncertain all year as to what's going to happen around some of the needed tax reform. That's a big issue. If they can get that done sooner with one more omnibus bill that covers trade, immigration, and tax altogether. You know, Hugh, very well, because you and I have discussed this before, what it did to the markets in 81, 82, when they passed one of the greatest tax reform bills ever passed in American history, but delayed its enactment until the following year. And that really hurt the economy and helped facilitate a double-dip recession in the early part of Reagan's presidency. They need to get this thing done sooner and implement it sooner.
You're also referring to the sequence of events which has led to my adamant position that one bill is better than two. Because I was back in Reagan land when the 1982 election came in and the Republicans got wiped out. They got wiped out because the tax bill did not pass in time to have any impact on the economy. And if Republicans don't want to get wiped out in 2026, they will have the hard conversation and come to the hard conclusion and put that bill on the president's desk. They've got to pass a budget resolution. They've got to get a CBO scoring. They have to adopt. The CBO will score trillions of dollars of debt, David. Would that hold you back at all? Because the CBO always, they blow their dynamic scoring. They really don't know how to predict runaway growth, but they have predicted growth patterns of below 2% for the next 3 years. That's not really acceptable to Trump. Do you think it is?
No, one of the big variables, Hugh, that can help in the CBO scoring is the baseline that they use. If they start off presupposing that the 2017 sunsetting provisions are going to sunset, then they're really handicapping the scoring going forward of what deficit impact will be. But if they don't do that, then it enables us to pass something better now and not have the same proposed deficit impact. I'm a big fan of deficit scoring and dynamic scoring, and I agree with you that they ought to be bullish around the impact of what happened with Kennedy's tax cuts, Reagan's tax cuts, Clinton's reduction of capital gain, the Bush tax cuts. They should allow for assumption of great economic growth out of it, but that's not the only variable. There's also elements of revenue. I happen to believe that the deficit's coming down $400 or $500 billion this year, just simply because they've underestimated revenue. Okay, the U.S. stock market was up $12 trillion last year. And we don't think we're going to get 200 or 300 billion of additional revenue that's not currently CBO scored. That's a big factor in how the reconciliation process plays out.
David, it's sort of a puzzle, and for the benefit of the Steelers fans, the Congress has to agree on a budget, and that budget is going to be scored by the CBO, and they can approve a budget with a deficit number. Sometimes, I believe in the first Trump term, they agreed to have a red ink pool of $1.5 trillion in the first, and that's why they sunsetted it to keep it at $1.5 trillion. But if you add revenue, you can do more on the tax side. Not only can you cut taxes on tips, you can also cut taxes on Social Security, which is not my favorite idea, but the president likes it. And you can increase the SALT deduction, which is one of my favorite ideas because of the equity issue. But how do you get revenue? And I have three sources of revenue. I'd like your thoughts on all of them. First of all, gambling has taken over the country. Electronic gambling is everywhere. There are 50 different state laws on it. If the federal government comes in and preempts all those laws, lays down the law on gambling, and then attaches a small tax on every gambling transaction, let's say 25 cents, a quarter. What do you think that would do to gambling? What would it do to revenue?
Well, it wouldn't do anything to gambling in terms of diminishing the behavior because similar to alcohol tax and fuel tax and tobacco tax, these so-called sin tax things they've done, behaviors are not impeded by small taxes. They're impeded by large ones, and they're not going to be able to do large ones. It would raise revenue. It would harmonize some of those things. I'm not, Hugh, a big believer in trying to use the tax code to curtail behavior. I want it to be a little more equitable than that, but I do agree that there should be harmony. And we already have tax laws, Hugh, for how gambling is taxed federally. All they have to do is harmonize those tax laws to online gaming, and that would solve a lot of the stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm looking for a per transaction. I don't think it will end it, but I think we could at least quantify it. The second thing is, as you know, and as most of my audience know, the federal government continues to consider marijuana a restricted drug, but that's not what the states are doing, and there's no enforcement. It's a silly situation where we've got marijuana laws of all different sorts and complexities, but an unregulated market out there. What about preempting all the state laws and putting something into place that is coherent as to the amount of cannabis, TCH, whatever the active ingredient is, in the drug, and begin to tax it on the federal side?
Yeah, I still, as the states have had a hard time collecting the anticipated state revenue because a very large black market continues to exist even where there's been legalization in states, I'm skeptical that the federal government would collect anticipated revenue. But I do agree that where we have laws that are totally token, unenforceable, and basically laughable, they may as well just codify it and try to collect some revenue. This is a tough issue for me, Hugh, because I was a vehement opponent of legalization when I was much younger. Bill Buckley and, frankly, my late father convinced me of the argument for legalization. And now it's been such a debacle in the way they've done it. And you walk up and down the streets and places where people can't smoke cigarettes, but they're allowed to smoke marijuana. I think the way these states have done it is so bad that now I've gone the other side. So I move all around on the issue. But you're talking about revenue. And I certainly believe that if it's going to be happening, the federal government should collect revenue. But they're not going to collect 100% of the revenue they're supposed to, because this is just a space that lends itself to black market.
Yeah, in fact, the state set the tax codes too high because the dope that is sold through state stores is so expensive that people buy it on the street again, and on the street is more dangerous. It's got fentanyl in it sometimes, and the tax revenue did not arrive. One coherent national standard, one source of revenue makes sense. Then the big one. Many retirement funds are in traditional IRAs, not Roth IRAs. Roth IRAs are actually the economically advantageous. I always teach my law students, always go with Roth until you've maxed out, pay the taxes on it now, grow it tax-free forever. If they allowed for conversions from existing IRA 401ks, David, to Roth, and they did a flat 10% conversion tax, not the income that you're at, I think they would actually achieve a significant one-time burst of dollars to lower the deficit impact of the Trump tax cut extension. What do you think?
Well, yeah, but Hugh, they can't score it that way, though. They have to score it over the 10 years. And it would be a huge amount of upfront revenue. We've done this before, by the way, where you get a one-time ability to do it, but then you're losing all that revenue in the future. And so, first of all, to your broader point, remember, you can't go into a Roth if you make over a certain amount of income. And most people that are huge retirement funders are well over those income thresholds. But for conversions, you can. And right now, you're right, it's taxed at ordinary income, whatever your marginal income rate would be, where you're suggesting a 10% holiday. I'm agreeing with you. It would be a huge boon of revenue up front, but it would take away a bunch of revenue in the future, and they have to score that too, so it gets more complicated.
I know they would have to score it. I think it's almost impossible to estimate what that would be because the Roth can't come out, right, until you're 68 or 60, whatever the rules are. I have no idea what the rules are. But once you convert it, that conversion, it stays there. It protects your retirement. It takes away the distortion of playing with retirement funds, which I like in the market, creates only one funding mechanism, and you get a windfall one time to pay for part of this tax cut. It is important to get this done, David. And the president-elect, who's coming on the show later today, said he wants one big, beautiful bill. Any idea how soon you expect that? What are you telling your clients when you'll have clarity on the tax bill?
Well, remember, 3 days ago, we didn't even have clarity as to whether or not they were going to try for two bills or one bill. And there were really good arguments. I mean, no less than Stephen Miller, who definitely has the president's ear, not to mention Senate Majority Leader John Thune, both wanted a two-bill approach. And there was a good reason politically for it. Get an easy win really quickly, and then just accept you're going to have a longer win and a harder fight on tax later. I disagreed. Speaker Johnson and others, you and I have both been on this side. Larry Kudlow, Art Laffer, we need a tax win sooner than November. And so we're not going to get it in February, March, but somewhere between April and July here is what I'm expecting. And the CBO window is going to be the most important part. You have to know what numbers you're working with. Once Kevin Brady got that in 2017, they knew what they were working with. You were right what you said earlier. It was $1.5 trillion. Then they had to deal with the sunsetting nonsense and turn the knobs up and down. There's things people liked and didn't like. You talked about salt and some of the others. They're talking about some things with tariffs here where they want to basically do a rebate for exports, but then tax certain things on imports, but then give exemptions for like energy. So this thing's going to get complicated. It's not going to happen in 1 month. 3 to 4 months.
This is what I always say to people, though. Every good settlement is a complicated negotiation that usually takes about 48 hours of short strokes. And you just got to get to the cutting and to the pasting quicker because it's still the same set of decisions. You can do it in 1 day or you can do it in 1 year. David Bahnsen of the Bahnsen Group, thank you for joining me.